Why are maps so interesting? What is it about a map at the beginning of a fantasy novel, or when you use a map to do a campaign, even if the map itself doesn't do anything except just show which territories you've managed to get? Why are they so interesting? Why do they just press the right buttons in your brain and make your imagination come alive? I'm Matthew from Mini Wargaming, and this is a video essay about maps, but it's really just a cleverly guised advertisement for the upcoming Kickstarter for Hexen Hills sci-fi tiles that allow you to build beautiful maps. They actually have fantasy ones already out. They did a Kickstarter years ago for that, and they finally have a set for sci-fi as well. So yes, I'm going to talk about them. I'm not going to hide the fact that's why I made this video. But it is something that's near and dear to my heart, so I do want to talk about it. It's on my list of things because there's so much I want to talk about for rules development and game development, and maps is actually a big part of that. I remember when I was younger and I was getting into role-playing games, and my very first role-playing game was Advanced Fighting Fantasy by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, the same ones who founded Games Workshop, actually. I discovered it accidentally because they had a series of Choose Your Own Adventure books, and then I went to buy more of those, and I accidentally picked up the advanced one, which is actually their role-playing game. And the very first one was called Port Blacksand. And that one was all about, it's a supplement. It wasn't even actually the rules of the game. I was so confused. But it was all about how to build cities. And the whole thing centered a lot around making a map. And I got into making maps so hard. I started drawing my own fantasy maps. They even said, like, here's how you can draw your maps. And I just fell in love with that concept. And as I got older, I noticed that this trend kept coming up, that the moment you added a map to almost anything, I found myself more excited. We played a Necromunda campaign a couple of years ago for Ash Waste. I don't remember exactly when it was, still available. And in that, we had to take over roads between cities. Now, Games Workshop provides you with a deck of cards to represent the roads, and so you don't need a map, but I still wanted one. So we used the Hexen Hills range of fantasy tiles mixed with their wasteland tiles that they came out with about a year or two ago, or whenever it was, because they made them for this campaign. And I made a map that represented exactly the map that you see in the book, because the book actually had a map, which is just so awesome. And that just brought it to life to a level that I could never have done just with cards. Like, here, you own these roads, here you go, here's your 3 cards, I own these roads. It's like, no. We're gonna plant flags in these different territories to represent our ownership of that. And that just instantly made it more fun, even though it didn't technically do anything rules-wise different. It's not like the map then dictated how we would move around or anything like that. On the other hand, we've done some pretty extreme things with maps, like the Age of Sigmar campaign, where I had guests come in and actually fight over the various realms. We made a huge fantasy map for that. And then we actually tracked territories, and you could only attack adjacent territories. And so people would come in and they would be either the attacker or defender. The attacker would choose an adjacent territory to fight. If they win, they get to take it. If they lose their territory to them. So either way, somebody is gaining a territory. And that was so much fun. It wasn't perfect, but I came up with an entire system of, even went on the Magic the Gathering Cardsmith or MTG Cardsmith and made Magic the Gathering cards for each location, because if you held certain locations, they would give you bonuses in-game. So in that case, the map actually did have rules and had a way to interact with the game itself. Games Workshop did something similar many, many years ago with their Mighty Empires, which was the fantasy version, and then they came out with Planetary Empires later on. And that was designed, they actually had a little booklet that gave you a little campaign that you could run. And I remember when that came out, I instantly fell in love with it. I even went to a games day in Toronto, and they had used those to make, I think it was a map of the old world, actually, is what they had done. But it was gigantic, like insanely big, like 20 or 30 feet across. And I just absolutely love it. So, I want your comments below. Why do you think it works so well? I know I can say things like, well, it's a visual medium. It allows you to kind of picture things a lot better. And I think that's true, but you can say the same thing of like artwork in books, which is fantastic. Like if you're reading the old Lord of the Rings books, the ones that are illustrated with those twins, I don't remember their name, that made all that different artwork of Rivendell and the different locations. And I know that helped that book come alive. But the thing I think that helped that book come alive the most is the map of Middle-earth, because then you can see the journey that Frodo and Sam and the Fellowship had to take to go from the Shire all the way to Mount Doom. And there's something about that just allows the reader to engage in the progression, because progression in stories is really important. And a map really helps you to feel that progression because you know where they're going and you kind of know where in the story you are based on where they are on the map. And so that just enhanced it so much. And I've continued to do that. We made a huge map for the old world using the Hexen Hills tiles. We scaled them down to 50% so they can actually have cool coastlines and really represent Bretonnia and the Empire and the Badlands and Kislev and all of these locations. And in both cases, for the Age of Sigmar and this old world map, Adam from Greenleaf Terrain did a fantastic job in painting them up to make them just really come alive. But once again, that's with the Hexen Hills range of tiles. Now, the really cool thing about Hexen Hills, if I can like pop in the advertisement part, is that you can print them using FDM printers or resin printers. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, the FDM printers are the much more safe. They melt the plastic, put it down. You could have that in your house without any real safety things. Still have moving parts and it gets hot, so you'd want to keep it away from children and pets and in a separate room. But ventilation-wise, as long as you're printing with PLA, it's not much of a concern. Resin, on the other hand, requires a lot more safety concerns. I actually have two courses, one that's complete for how to 3D print terrain, which focuses on FDM, and then I have an upcoming one for resin as well. So you can sign up for those for free so you can get into it if you're not currently into 3D printing. But either way, these are designed to be printed on either for the most part. There's some really specialty ones which you kind of need to do in resin because there's just no way to support them properly. They're just fantastic. They print really well. You can do them with tabs or without, so the tabs allow them to go together. They have room for magnets, both on the bottom and on the sides. So you have all these different options. You can build entirely huge maps or just small little provinces and locations. You can scale them. 50 to 75 and 100% of the scale seem to work really, really well depending on what you're trying to do. And I just love it. And I've done even more with them, and I'm going to continue to do more. We've built planets for an upcoming narrative campaign that we're doing using the new sci-fi tiles. We have like a hive world. We've got an agra world, grave world, I can't remember what they're called, where it's just the entire moon is one giant grave. And it just brings the imagination to life. So I guess what I try to do in this video essay, besides sell the upcoming Hexen Hills Kickstarter, which you should totally follow at the link below, and that'll help support us and Graven Guild because we are partnered with them for this one. And so if you help support that campaign, it actually helps Mini Wargaming as well. So if you want to help this channel, that is such a good way to do it. I would just say right now that I would be very appreciative if you did that, if you can. And if you don't have a 3D printer and you have no interest in 3D printing, we do sell the printed ones for the fantasy ones, and we will sell the sci-fi ones as well. But what do you think it is? If we really go through the reasons, we know, of course, that maps allow us to visualize things. Brandon Sanderson, I've been watching his, he's a famous fantasy writer, if you don't know who he is. And he has a lecture series because he taught at a university, but he made the lecture series available for free. And he talked about how one of the things that makes a story good is progress. That basically throughout the story, there should always be some sort of progress. And there's a lot more details to it than that. Like there's different ways to have progress and what that means. But in the end, he's like, you start off with a promise of what's going to happen, and then you progress towards it, and then you have, difficulties along the way, and there's all sorts of details, and in the end, you fulfill the promise that you made at the beginning. We can think of that in really classical stuff, like Lord of the Rings. The promise is they're going to go on a journey and destroy the ring, and spoiler alert, at the end, that is fulfilled. The authors don't always do it perfectly, because then Tolkien goes on to write an entire other story, which is not a bad thing. It's just whatever he did. But progress is such an important thing. And Brandon Sanderson pointed out that, because he puts maps in all of his books, is that the reason he does that is because the maps help inform the progress. And that really brings about a certain firing of the neurons, which is very satisfying, and it makes us happy. The same thing with why I use maps in some of these campaigns, even if the map does nothing for the campaign, like the Necromunda campaign that we did, where we had the map that I didn't need it. They came with cards that tell you which roads you own, but I wanted to be able to visualize it. And the moment I could visualize it, it gave a much better sense of progress and just basically satisfaction in taking over these roads. It's not just a card, it's like a visual medium that you're able to look at. And just like art really helps to enhance, I think maps really help to enhance as well. So I think that's probably the main reason, to be honest, is that we identify with them so much is because they help with that progress aspect. But that's not always the case with narrative campaigns that you do or some sort of conquest campaign that you might do with 40K. But then again, that might actually be it too, because then it helps to inform the progress. Is it just that? Is that all it is? Is that we love them because it helps? Maybe I'd give two big reasons. One, it's the imagination comes to life. You can picture things better. And two, it informs the progress of what is happening. I think that might be it. That might actually be like the big reasons. But there's probably things I'm not thinking of because I, in my own limited experience, can only think so far. So I would love your comments. By the way, I really appreciate your engagement in the videos that I've been putting up. There's been so much of it, and I love reading the comments. I don't get to reply to all of them, obviously. There's too many of them. But I love reading them because you guys have some really good inspirations for me. You come up with good ideas. You kind of say things and I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought of that way. And it helps me to better flesh out how I'm thinking so that as I design my own games, I can have those thoughts all in that short-term memory to allow me to make better stuff, better videos, better content, better games, everything. And just enjoy all of this a lot more. So I want your thoughts on this. Why do you think maps? Or maybe you actually don't think maps or make things better, that they just like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care about maps. If that's your opinion too, let me know it below. So leave a comment below and then follow the link so you can follow the pre-launch of the Hexton Hills Kickstarter. Because even if you're not gonna buy it, it would really helpful for you to do that so you can take a look at it. And so maybe we can eventually convince you to do it because it's awesome and it's so much fun and it's great and it'll make you happy. Happy working.